I read your articles, and you like brought up some points about like building a UI to make it like to make addressing these problems more like tangible. Like you're able to access and explore what's wrong with your service a lot more ease. I actually haven't built any of that, and what I've basically been doing over the course of a couple projects, including the sales development representative project, which I might have alluded to, is I just utilize, for example, I use Fast API's API to determine to explore whether or not my agent is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And it is like it's definitely better than not having any visibility, but um, it's still a bit cumbersome to navigate. So I was curious, like how much time do you spend into making these UIs to have a better visual of how the performance of your system?
Yeah. Um, it keeps getting shorter and shorter in the amount of
Mhm.
time I need to spend making it. I think the first time it may have taken me like 3 or 4 days just to understand even if this is a good idea or what am I doing and like kind of figuring out what I even want.
Mhm.
But then nowadays it takes me, maybe like 2 or 3 hours to do something like that. And
Right.
especially if you know where the data is, I guess the time consuming part is like querying the data from wherever you're storing it and
Right.
then materializing it in some front end. And you have to have some understanding of like the structure of your data and how you want to show it. Once you have some workflow that you like some place you like storing your data, maybe it's, you know, Langsmith, Brain Trust,
Mhm.
Arise, or maybe it's a SQLite database that you have,
Right.
or I don't know what you want, but as long as you have a workflow that you like and you know that data, then it shouldn't take too long. Especially, and obviously you should be using AI assisted tools to help you build these
Yeah.
frameworks.
Yeah. Right. Um, Fair. Yeah. It's just I never really considered using a front end, but I do recognize that it would make things a lot easier. It just seems like a pretty massive. It just appears like a pretty big undertaking, but if you just keep it simple, I guess it's not too bad.
No, just keep it really simple. So basically, the idea is like you want to see all the information you need in one screen. You don't want to be
Mhm.
jumping around to like this database here, some other screen here, your traces in one place. You need all the context in one place. You know, bring it all
Mhm.
together, put it on the screen. It doesn't have to be pretty or
Yeah.
anything. It just so you can read it and you can like flip through data really fast and maybe like label something or take some notes, do whatever. I mean, maybe you don't
Right.
even need to take notes. Like you kind of have some idea of what you need, probably, and that you can just like quickly look at data to where the idea is looking at data shouldn't stress you out at all.
Mhm.
You shouldn't think in your mind, oh, I need to look at data. It's gonna be kind of
Yeah.
like this gonna be painful. You should be like, oh,
Yeah.
look at data. Oh, that's really fast. I'm just gonna open this app and I'm just gonna like check out some stuff. And then,
Yeah.
okay, I will say this. The first place to begin is not even building an app. Is like first, can you use a spreadsheet?
Mhm.
That is the simplest the way to view data, that exists.
Um, it's I would rather actually build a front end than use a
Okay,
spreadsheet.
fair
But
enough.
yeah, I mean, I create a CSV file, I can create an Excel doc, but not my strength.
Sure. So like yeah, Excel can be super easy depending on your data. If your data is like a lot of multi-turn conversations or something, then the spreadsheet might become unwieldy because you have a
Mhm.
lot of stuff going on in each row. And you might want something else.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and like their spreadsheet, okay, like you can walk up towards UI. So you can do spreadsheet, you can even do notebooks. So Jupyter notebooks or whatever. I don't know. What do you program in like
Um,
TypeScript or Python or any?
yeah, TypeScript, Python. Um, I don't do a lot of work on Colab, and Jupyter notebooks. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can kind of. like with Gradio and you know, in notebooks, you can kind of make your own little like sort of UI thingy looking thing. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, that's also good. It depends what you're comfortable with. Okay, what are we looking at? Open
Right.
plugin?
So this is one of the projects that I worked on, and one of the major problems that I ran into, and it was um, very hard to address, was that this entire project had a lot of dependencies, like a lot of chaining dependencies. One was you have an LLM that can fail at like inference time and failing to produce like the function calls, for example. Um, and then on top of that, like the so this is have you ever used ChatGPT plugins?
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's when this basically existed. That's when this was relevant. But I think that the concept that I'm gonna get at is still somewhat relevant. So the function call might fail, for example. Then after that, the plugin that it's trying to like reach out to, which is kind of an unreliable third-party service, might fail as well. And then presenting that to the user might have failed as well. So there was like several chaining areas of potential, several chaining pitfalls.
Got it.
It, um, being able to like address that, how I addressed it was just print logging as much as I could, and particularly like logging the errors whenever they would
Okay.
happen.
Let me tell you something that will help you.
Sure.
Um, so if you have, are you using any framework like, I don't know, like LangChain or something? Are you rolling your own? I was just curious. Like,
No, no, I'm not.
okay, no problem. So what I would do is, I would use some observability tools. So like,
Okay.
there's a lot of them out there. It depends like what you like. Um, there's paid stuff. So I mentioned some of this before, like Brain Trust. There's Langsmith. Arise has a paid one. There's also an open source thing that I quite like. It's called Phoenix Arise. It's like the open source kind of thing.
Hmm.
It has a Python SDK. Um, so if you don't like Python, then maybe Brain Trust, could be good as well. Like if
Okay.
you're into TypeScript, but basically you want to log the traces, you can instrument your code and there's like very convenient ways to instrument your code such that it will follow the whole code path or the whole like LLM path, like from, you'll be able
Right.
to see the entire trace of what happened, like what the prompt was, what the function call was, what the response from the function was, everything. And it's a nice way that it's kind of like standard in the industry, becoming a standard in industry to like log your data this way. And once you log your data this way, now you will have a whole host of tools that will allow you to go further. So, if you log your data into one of these platforms, number one, you can easily pull it out and you can build your own UIs on top of it. You may have read in the blog post where I talk about building your own UIs. Like I built a UI on
Yeah.
top of Langsmith, for example, because I was working in Langsmith at the time and wrote that post.
Oh, isn't
Um,
Langsmith itself a UI?
it is, but sometimes so the point of that post was like, you want to customize the way you look at your data for yourself. So like sometimes the data you push into here may
Hmm.
not be in the format you want to see it, you know? Because ultimately, like, this is not necessarily a data viewer. This is like more like it's like a data dog for LLMs. This is a very bad analogy, but it's kind of the closest I can get
Okay.
to help you to understand. It's like, so essentially, like, uh, you you can push your data in here and it'll help you navigate and filter your data and like query those logs in a very like structured way, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um,
And Langsmith provides like, does Langsmith host
yeah, all these tools like
the
Brain Trust and Langsmith, the paid ones are all hosted as far as I know. And but the yeah, like
and it stores the data for you is what I'm getting
yeah,
at.
yeah, it stores the data for
Okay.
you. So if you may or may not like that, the
Yeah.
open source one, uh, Phoenix, which you were just looking at, that's like self-hosted if you want. That's actually like host one for you too if you want, but you can host it
Mhm.
yourself.
Yeah.
They're all like they're pretty easy to use. Um, depending on what you want, you can see already how you get an idea, right? Like how it makes it easier for you to look at your data.
Yeah, if I
Um,
were able, if I was able to configure this, like that would have been a huge time saver.
yeah, and it's pretty
Just
easy to configure. Like a lot of these tools have auto instrumentation. So if you're using something like the OpenAI SDK,
hmm
which or whatever, or like the Cloud SDK, or whatever, they
hmm
will have like a wrapper around that that basically intercepts all the calls you're making and tries to instrument everything for you without you having to change that main lines of code.
Interesting. Okay. Um, yeah. So basically, creating a system that already like handles much of the like abstractions and just
So my
telemetry.
advice is like
Basically,
you
system
don't want to
telemetry.
build a logging tool yourself.
hmm
I think you can build your front end to look at data. That is worthwhile, but you don't want to build like the logging and the
Okay.
observability yourself. I don't
Yeah.
think. That's kind of probably too far away. You probably want to focus on building your AI apps.
hmm
So
Yeah, that's
I would,
basically what I was doing with Open Plugin. Like for example, whenever this
yeah.
happens, I receive a log that is tagged with like failing. I don't remember the specific details at this point, but yeah. No, everything was basically just a it was a MongoDB collection that just like logged everything. Um, and so I needed to build like additional endpoints to like parse through this, which I think that could have been abstracted by tools like Langsmith and Phoenix, right?
Yeah, take a look at those.
hmm
Um, use one of them. That like whichever one looks like it kind of fits your needs the most based upon like the languages you use and your preferences around like open source and closed source or hosted and not hosted. I don't, that's all a lot of stuff to navigate through, but like, you
hmm
get an idea. You can probably make a decision really fast, like taking a look at these things. And
Right.
yeah, and it really helps. And it helps you not only like look at your data, you can build a lot of things on top of it because they have APIs and stuff. Um, but it also help you when it comes time to write evals because all of these tools have facilities for you to like write tests and execute those tests against data that are in those databases. Like you can curate those traces. You can like save them off as like test cases in a way, and you can do things
hmm
like iterate on the prompt and like see what the outcome of that is. Um, you can write tests, and it kind of is very helpful.
Right. And when you're saying iterating on the prompts of these test cases, you do you mean like does it
Yeah,
actually perform inference after you submit the
yeah,
like
yeah.
a
So
new
what you can
prompt?
do is like you can
Did you build that
basically,
yourself too?
yeah, you can basically use data from your traces as inputs to uh, like inference. So like you can have like your prompt, and you can say, okay, like take this data set of these traces where and use like the inputs that you supplied in those traces to this like other prompt, and you can test it out, and you can see
Right.
what the output is, and you can do that like in parallel, and you can like keep iterating really fast to like kind of do. They all have the concept of this like prompt playground thing. This basically has string templating that, and the string
What are you
templating pulls from the data that you save.
are you describing a tool that you built or
No,
something
no,
that
that's in all of these things. If you adopt any of these
you
tools that I'm talking about, they'll have that. So I'm just
so
telling
they're
you that's
specifically
a
built for LLMs? Like,
yeah, all of
yeah.
these are specifically built for
Yeah.
LLMs. Yeah, yeah. They're all about
Mhm.
LLMs. So like they have all these other
Cool.
tools. Once you put your data in there, they try to help you with like a bunch of other things. So it's not only about a place to it's not just a glorified database, is what I'm trying to tell
Mhm.
you. It's like a little bit more.
Yeah, because that was one of the main issues that I was running into. Like whenever I was running this agent action, I would have it go from like zero to the end,
Mhm.
and that just led to a lot of wasted time and money. So being able to just like directly pinpoint a specific area is good. Yeah, so the last thing that I wanted to mention is something that I'm going to be working on now, which is this concept of basically generating your own actions and saving them in a database that can be accessed by any other agent. It's based on this paper, Dinosaur, Beyond Predefined Actions. Um, and one of the big things that I see, one of the big problems that I expect to run into here is that it should be like really unopinionated on how the users will end up using these actions. So um, I don't know how I'm going to be able to effectively evaluate this when it's like so open-ended as to how our users can use this. Um, because it's basically we're building an internal tool that's going to serve basically other agents.
Okay, so you're asking, you have this component in your LLM based automation, and you're
Hmm.
wondering like, because the scope of it is so large, you're wondering how you might evaluate it.
Yes.
Okay. The best way to evaluate something like that is to do something called error analysis. So error analysis, um, I can show you one of my posts. I can share my screen. Let me see if I can do that quick.
Do I need to stop sharing?
I'm not sure. I don't, yeah, go ahead and stop sharing. I'll help with the recording. Um, so there's this post creating LM as a judge that drives results. It's quite a long post. Um, but there's a section in here called perform error analysis.
Hmm.
And so the main point is, hey, like when you're doing evals, there's so many things you can eval, right? There's like so many components of your system. There's so many things that your system does. Like, how do you even start? How do you even know what to eval?
The
And
feature
like,
scenario persona.
yeah. And so basically, so what you want to do is ground what you're testing in the errors that you see.
Hmm.
So you kind of want to go a little bit in reverse and say like, okay, I can eval anything in the world under the sun, but you don't have time for that. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through and start looking at data and classify any problems that you see. So like
Hmm.
basically, so this is like there's a video on it. This is a very old concept from machine learning. There's
Is it
this video from Andrew Ng in the blog
is it
post. You
in
can
production that you're logging these errors or during during development I guess obviously.
Okay, so there's two approaches. One is if you don't have production data, then you can generate synthetic data to try to simulate what a user might do. And this blog post will kind of give you an idea of how you can try to simulate that data. But you need some data to push it through. You need like fake humans or fake users or real users or whatever, or real interactions or it doesn't matter. Of course, real is better, but during development, you may not have a choice.
Hmm.
But basically, like what you want to do is say, okay, like you want to go through, and it's very simple. Error analysis sounds like a very fancy term. It's really not fancy. It's like kind of dumb, which is good. It's very accessible. What you do is like you go through your data and you start categorizing like what are the problems you see, and
Uh-huh.
like maybe you look at I don't know 50 examples and you start like making a note. Okay, this is the problem I see. This is the problem I see. And then when you're done with the 50 examples, you just add it up and you kind of see, okay, like what are the largest problems I see? And you can like just do something like this. Like this is just a very toy example. Like,
Hmm.
okay, most of my problems are like around user education. Or you know what, my internal tool has some authentication or access issue. And then you can just ground it in whatever the errors are. That's what I would do.
Okay, and this is like um potentially something you could determine after running the like feature persona scenario ablations.
Yeah. And like, don't feel like you have to go take to follow this blog post so closely. I mean,
Hmm.
do what makes sense for you. This is just like an example of like to get you started thinking about how you
Hmm.
can simulate like your data. Maybe there's maybe there's something that is not a feature scenario persona. Maybe there's like some other dimension that makes sense. But
Right.
I was just trying to give people an example, like, okay, this is how you can think about it, when you
Yeah, the feature scenario persona is something that did really stick with like just getting yourself thinking about the different use cases of how a program might be used.
yeah,
Uh, it seems pretty useful. I'm definitely going to be just playing around with that.
yeah. I mean, but certainly I mean, you should be using it too. Like this thing, you should be trying to use it yourself, and hopefully you are generating some data yourself as you
Hmm.
use your own tools.
Yeah.
You should certainly start there as some intuition. So,
Hmm.
um, like these blog posts that I have, like they say, okay, you shouldn't rely on vibe checks, but you should start with some vibe checks. You just can't. That will only take you so far, and at some point you will need to do this kind of simulation and generate data, whatever. If you're trying to make it robust before you, let's say, release it to the outside world, you know.
Hmm.
But before that, like it is good. You should be using it yourself and seeing what it's doing, and that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. What I was the experience I had with the sales development representative agent was that everything I was doing was just basically vibe checks. That's how I was evaluating everything. And just over time, gradually, I ended up building out some sort of just like internal API, internal endpoints to better be able to understand things and to save myself money and time. Um, but I feel like maybe if I used a tool that was, designed for that, it might have saved me a good amount of time. But at that point, I don't know, like, when should I like switch over to this tool as opposed to just building my own tooling? Like, what's the threshold for?
Yeah, it's hard to know that. It's hard to know that. I would say like the logging stuff, you definitely want to go to your tools.
Hmm.
You don't definitely want to use tools, but then you definitely want to build tools to look at data. It's actually a presentation that you may find helpful. Let me share my screen again. It's like let me see if I can find it. So yeah, if you Google Hamel AI Engineer Evals, there's
Hmm.
this short presentation. It's like 15 minutes or so that kind of like I talk a lot about okay, like what tools to use, like what to buy, what to build,
Hmm.
uh, how to think about evals. It sounds like I don't know. I have an intuition that you might find it useful, like this specific video.
Okay.
I'll talk about like different kinds of tests. Um, like I talk about logging your traces, kind of like we just talked about, and I'll say like, like look at your traces, but build your tools, like in this case, if you need it. Um,
Yeah, as I'm like as I read through your article and as you're like sharing these ideas, I just constantly keep thinking like, there's so many opportunities to just like automate this work and like create workflows between like for example yourself and your expert domain expert to just better analyze LLMs. And it's so tempting to just like go immerse yourself in like building these additional tools as opposed to like focusing on the product itself.
yeah, I mean, it is tempting. I will say there's a lot of people building tools in that space. Like we are not the only, it is an extremely crowded area. Basically everyone, yeah, it has occurred to a lot of people. Let's put it that way.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good amount. A good amount of resources to work with and ideas to play around with. And um, again, I appreciate your time. And if it's okay, I'll let you know how things are going over the
Yeah,
course of.
please send me an email and let me know or get in touch and let me know how it goes. Really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Emil.